Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Prodigal Son. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're picking up where the last episode left off, obviously with Malcolm talking to Paul and kind of learning a little bit more. And it's also interesting learning how Paul kind of got obsessed about, later on we kind of dive into this where it's like Paul gets obsessed about the fact is, how'd you figure out where I kept, because they end up finding out where he had kept one of his victims. But it was the fact of the matter is, it's because, I don't think he was completely lying, because Malcolm talked about the fact is, he took that one line of you interrupted my work, and it made him go okay, so that means he was in the middle, because obviously we find out later on that he keeps his victims for a period of time because some of his victims didn't have any food in their stomach, so they were being held. So it's okay, the junkyard, it wouldn't be somewhere where he has easy access to, because if it was somewhere he had to drive to, there was a chance he might get pulled over or something like that, which that immediately makes me think of season 1 of wasn't it season? Yeah, I think season 1 of Bosch, kind of similar circumstances, transporting a killer, transporting that the whole situation. It just made my mind immediately think of that a little bit. But regardless of all of that, it turns out, at least how Malcolm kind of pieces it together, that basically Paul is kind of he thinks that his killings are some divine mission, because a lot of the people he kills are people who are homeless, maybe prostitution or drugs and stuff like that. So he thinks of himself as, I'm cleansing the world. And it's Malcolm, I don't want to hurt you, but if you get in my way, you're going to interrupt my mission, and my mission comes first, because he thinks it is a divine mission, which is also interesting because obviously this is the first time, it's not Gil's first time, but it's definitely JT and Danny's first time at, his mom's house. It's so this is where Malcolm grew up. It's a very nice house, and he's well, yeah, here's a picture of my great uncle. Here's the fireplace this is where we set up the Christmas tree, and this is exactly where my dad was arrested for all those murders. And Danny's that's a good picture of your great uncle. It's quite handsome and stuff like that. And obviously, and it's the sad thing is, you can see with Jessica, obviously this moment, all the police crawling around her house is a reminder of 20 years ago. It was almost like it was happening all over again. And obviously, Jessica's way of dealing with things is drinking. So she's oh, can I get you something to drink? And everyone's just kind of no. It's oh, do you want something with you? It's she just needed to do something to kind of take her mind off of it, just because it kind of got her mind racing about everything. So it is interesting that she has a little hollowed out book where she can store her gun. That was pretty interesting. But I even love that Eve later on shows up and she's toting around the gun and everything, which is interesting because it's well, that's not a good combination of you being drunk and flailing a gun around. But it's because obviously she's supposed to meet up with Eve about, the project they're working on and everything. But for her, she got so consumed by the fact is of this is on her mind of because it's just no matter, and it's something she talks about later on, no matter what she does, she can't escape Martin. The fact of the matter is, sometimes she's fortunate enough to be able to go, some time without thinking about Martin or what he's become. But then there's other days that it's just before she can even get her day started, she's already thinking about him, and it ruins her entire day. So the very complicated situation. I feel that's something you never really get too much insight into. A lot of times I feel in these cases, this is just based on crime dramas I've seen. In these cases, you get the other side of you focus mainly on the serial killer. So it's just interesting to kind of see the significant other side of things, of where it's kind of the SO who never knew and has to deal with the ramifications. She's had to deal with this for 20 years, and I think she's compartmentalized the best she can. She's handled it the best way she can, but you can also tell that she handles it with her own grace. That the fact of the matter is that, there's a lot underneath those smiles and drinks, that there's a lot of stuff building up there that she's not really talking to anyone about. I think if anyone needs therapy, she definitely needs therapy too. But it seems Malcolm is the one that's the most outwardly messed up because of all the circumstances. This episode kind of hints to the fact is that Ainsley, to a certain extent, when you actually think about it, it's kind of just as messed up, and I think that's a feature, I feel an aspect they're kind of leaning into more and more in this episode. Well, Well, I'll circle back to it soon enough. But I even did like the fact is that Eve showed up at Malcolm's place, and part of me wonders is like just that first introduction it made me think like, oh, like Jessica is trying to hook Malcolm and Eve up because it's like, oh, letting Eve know where Malcolm's personal address is and stuff like that. Malcolm didn't really bring that up, but I'm like, that's what that's got to be. And it's like, yeah, Eve stopped by my place and she said, oh, isn't she wonderful? And it's like, yeah, she told me about you waving a gun, and she was like, that tattletelling. Was it hussy or something like not that? I forgot what the word she used. I was like, that's so funny. You went a complete 180 in that matter of seconds. In that, or just how wonderful it is. Oh, she's such a tattletale. But nevertheless. But like I was saying, like it's just interesting because like for her, she wants a normal life because it's like I didn't let the complicated situation that was your father and everything that he did pull me away from this house. This house, the Miltons built so much, and this is our house. Like there's always been a Milton living in this house, and I wasn't going to let your father take that away from me. She made that clear before. That's why, it's kind of interesting because like obviously why she kept the last name Whitley is because she was able to do so much good with that name, and she's not going to let that good be tarnished. She's not going to let the good that she's done with that name be tarnished by the terrible stuff that Martin has done with it. So it's like, even if there's another serial killer running around, I'm not going to let him pull me away from my home. This is where I live. This is my home. I'm not like anyone scare me away from that. And it's so interesting because that's an aspect I think is kind of interesting because so far we've dealt with. This is our first main overarching serial killer because usually, because we've dealt, I think, I'm blanking already, but there's been some serial killers before now, I believe, or is this the first one in the show? Because I know there's been like one-off killings in the show, but I don't think there's been outright another. I think this is like our first serial killer in the show. God, I keep feeling like I'm blanking already on the first couple episodes of like someone who had multiple victims or not. I don't remember. But I mean, obviously it's just interesting because this case is now sparking across multiple episodes. This is the second episode. So I think that's going to be a big arc in the story and stuff like that. So once again, Idrissa coming in to steal the show. What the fact is of like, yeah, she's like, oh yeah, it's kind of hard because she's got to put bones together with flesh, and it's like, and Malcolm references it being kind of like a big puzzle, and she's like, oh, you should, she's like, so you're into, she's like, oh, so you're into puzzles. I've got like this 500 piece thing or something like that. She's like, and JT's over there looking like, really? Come on, is this really the time? And he's just like, come on, really? Or come on, really? Are we doing this? So I just thought that was kind of interesting in the long run. Now, what also makes this case interesting is because Paul isn't just some average serial killer. It's not even just the fact is, well, one big thing is obviously, as we know, he was kind of mentored by Martin, but what makes it even more interesting, and it's something that, got brought up last episode that we're elaborating on more, is he was there on that hunting trip with Martin and Malcolm, even being like, why is it that you don't remember Malcolm? And then even during the call when they're trying to trace it, he brings up the girl from the suitcase, something that Malcolm has kept bringing up over and over again. When he was younger, people thought he was making, like at the very least, it's like he was imagining something. And obviously even as an adult, his mom and Gil still believed that he was. But now it's a thing of like someone else has acknowledged the fact is that this woman was real. It was real, which makes me think that she has something to do with that camping trip. The lady in the box has something to do with. I don't think those are two separate people. I think they're the same person, and I think maybe that's what set it off for him. Why when he found her in the box he started screaming, because it was whatever it was that went down in that hunting trip he blocked out mentally. And I think in that moment, like they ended up couldn't dispose of the body like they wanted to because they wanted to probably see what Malcolm remembered or whatever, and so they were in the process of disposing it, hence why it was there. But obviously when he came back it was gone. I think those two things are linked. That's the same thing. Whoever was in the back of the station wagon is the same person that was in the box. So there's that whole situation. And hearing that again is obviously it's triggering things for Malcolm. He's so desperate to get answers about them because that's a key thing that's escaping his mind, because it's like, it's not only is there another victim out there, but something he was kind of told for years he was crazy about. Turns out like, no, there's some truth to that. And obviously there's a lot that his mind is blocking out related to that. So it's like, what was it? Who is this woman? And why is this, why is this something that's blocked in my mind? Everything related to her At the very least, it seems. He chases after Paul. And I was wondering, because I kept thinking the entire time, I was like, just the way his facial hair looked and stuff, I was like, don't tell me it's going to be Father Leo, who is played by Matt Servito. That's pretty interesting. I was like, holy crap. Thing I'm best known for is playing Brock on in Banshee. But the fact of the matter is he's popped up in many different things. I've seen him pop up in many different shows, but that's just kind of like my go-to. It's like him as Brock from Banshee, but regardless, going on a bit of a tangent. But then I realized it's like, right, Paul's got more just of a mustache. He doesn't have like the facial hair Father Leo does. And it's an interesting situation where it's like Father Leo, because Danny was kind of thinking it might be Father Leo, but it's like, for Malcolm, it's like, no, whoever Paul is, he believes heavily in his mission, whereas Father Leo is questioning it, because it's like, despite all the good you do, which he believes in the work he does, but it's just kind of like, in the end, it's almost like there's no winning. You always feel like you're losing, because like he finds out that some of the people he took into at the shelter and stuff like that, people with drug addiction problems and stuff, like he finds out at least 2 of them were murdered, and obviously Ryan was one of those that was kidnapped and was almost murdered. And then Ryan said that whole thing of like, how long do I have, there's no saving me, which Malcolm in turn says that basically it's Paul kind of making them realize like, oh, giving them a counter of like, oh yeah, like at any point in time I'm going to end up killing you, so basically enjoy what time you have, and making them repent for whatever sins that they've committed, whatever it be, like I said, whether it be prostitution or drugs, because like they're unclean, they need to be wiped clean. He thinks he's on once again some holy mission or whatever. But what was interesting is when Malcolm confronting him, and like what do you call those turnstiles or whatever, I don't know what you call those things in that underground that he was like squishing Malcolm with. It was like, oh, that was brutal. He even had to like put ice on his ribs and stuff like that, because home dude was squishing him. But it's that whole thing of like, okay, and I brought it up earlier, I don't think Malcolm was lying, because obviously he pieced things together the way he did, sure, but it wasn't a complete answer, because it's like, my father basically taught me how to think like a serial killer. And and even Paul said himself, it's like, right, you can't be taught that, it's in your blood. I am my father's son, so because of I am the son of a serial killer, I can think like a serial killer. It is like, yeah, it's in your blood and everything. So I'm interested to see what Paul's plan is for Malcolm, because it seems like what I believe Martin's plan was to turn, Malcolm into himself, of like, oh, he saw himself in Malcolm. I'm like, oh, Malcolm, you can be just like me. But obviously it didn't work out 100% for whatever reason. But I think Martin is still tugging at those strings, that darkness that might be in Malcolm. He might be, predisposed to that darkness because of his father and everything, right? So I think Paul's trying to pull at those strings too, of like, oh, there might still be hope for you, yeah, kid. Like, oh, you're a lot like your dad. You smell like him. You act like him. You talk like him. So there's that. But when it comes down to the confrontation and everything, it turns into a thing of like, he was never there. Father Leo was never in any danger other than getting his hand sliced off. Which there was a part of me, like I said, when I was still kind of believing that Father Leo might end up being Paul, even though everything was saying he really wasn't, even though getting his hand chopped off, part of me was wondering, like, you don't think he did that just kind of, subvert expectations or something like that to kind of throw it off? But it's like, no. Well, Father Leo in the entire case himself was meant to be a distraction, because it's like, oh, because Ryan was his main target. And I liked how Malcolm phrases it later on. It's like he was pinned for judgment. The fact of the matter is, the whole point of this was to show that Father Leo was never the target, Ryan was, and because he's been signed for judgment, the fact of the matter is, no matter where he is, that he'll always be, that Paul will find him, but found him and killed him, because it's like this holy mission of mine. When judgment is set, you will pay up, essentially, so. He did, however, give Malcolm the a wrist bracelet that belonged to the woman from the box. But, and then Ainsley was in the hospital at the same time as a killer. And luckily, I don't think he would have killed Ainsley. He probably would have tried to take her for other reasons, to kind of force Malcolm's hand or whatever. I mean, because these are both his mentor's children, so I don't think he wants to kill them. But I guess it's like an unnecessary. If I have to, I have to. But we'll see in the long run. But sadly, Paul ended up killing Ryan and managed to get away. So. What's interesting too, and since I brought up Ainsley, and the reason why I thought was kind of interesting this side of the episode is like, oh, she's there visiting her boyfriend, her boyfriend / cameraman Jen, and It's like, oh, while he's over there recovering and he's waking up, he's trying to get her attention. Oh, what is she doing? She's editing the video. And even I made note of the fact is, of like, he's like, I'm sorry we had to interrupt the thing. And she's like, yeah, I just take the footage we have. I'm like, oh, so you're leaving out the fact is you filmed him when he was literally dying and your dad was working on it, which even I was like, yeah, that is pretty messed up. So I can see why you don't want to bring that up. But I think it shows you the fact is of how important her work is. But at the same time, it's like Malcolm has his own disturbance and kind of obsessions with murder, and I think Ainsley in a twisted sense does too. But you can also make the argument it could just be like she's very career driven, so that could be something she kind of pulls from her mom. It's a little bit from her mom and her dad, but it could be just that obsessive nature that both Malcolm and her have that comes from their dad, so there's multiple ways to look at that. But you also feel bad because it's like you're over there editing that rather than being Jim. It's like, oh, you're like, oh wow, you're awake. It's almost like, oh, like you didn't like. I get like you're both cracking jokes about like, oh, how are you? Oh, he's like, I feel like I've been stabbed. So she's like, oh, so like a 6 out of 10. It's like, yeah, that's sure fine, but it's like the fact is you were so busy editing that. I think that speaks volume. And even what made Jen decide to look at the computer in the first place was like, the entire time, all you were doing was running around talking about like, oh yeah, there's another serial killer out there and stuff like that. You were a little too gleeful about it. And Malcolm had brought that up last episode as like, whoa, you're acting like you're about to jump for joy about this whole circumstance that we're in right now, So it kind of shows you where her priorities are. And so for him, he didn't feel like a priority. So when he looks into it, it's like, whoa, like the fact that she's like, my job is important to me. And he's like, yeah, but I can't be with someone that's like that. And so you almost seem Ainsley kind of pissed at him and like, well, it's your fault. You're missing on, like, I don't know. I wonder, has Ainsley always been like that, or was the circumstances of meeting with her father shifting that? There was something probably already there. Like I said, I just get the feeling that does seem like a level of you're kind of disturbed in your own way. You probably just don't realize it. But then again, it might be a thing of like, I'm just career driven. But who's to say that can't be? It can be. What I'm trying to say is like, who's to say that they don't? Those two things don't influence each other, or if not straight up the same thing. So I just thought that was kind of an incredible thing, an aspect of that whole situation. So I'm interested to kind of dive into that more. That whole entire family's screwed up. Jessica's screwed up. Malcolm's definitely screwed up. Ainsley, like I said, I think we are starting to see that she, in her own way, is kind of screwed up too. Even though she doesn't think, because she never had any interactions with her dad, she doesn't really remember him. All she has to base him on is from what Malcolm and Jessica say. So, but I think that's going to be something we kind of dive into more, Even her kind of pestering her brother about like, yeah, you better not let this get to CNN. You better contact me, your sister, first about this whole situation. Once again, it's almost like she's obsessed with murder. I mean, I guess when you kind of built your career around it, I don't know. It's a complicated thing. But things get even more complicated later on because just as Malcolm's telling his mom, it's like, no, stay here. We'll have police watching. I'll capture Paul so you can feel safe again. But it's like, nope. The FBI shows up and takes him off the case. Interestingly enough, we see one of the agents is played by Megan Good. I'm like, yo! Which I think she's popped. I could be wrong. Has she popped up on Empire? I feel like I remember seeing that she popped up on Empire, but maybe I'm full of shit. I do know, interesting enough, because I referenced that actor a couple episodes back who was in the TV show, not reboot, but continuation of Minority Report, which was, Minority Report. Megan Good played one of the leads. Interestingly enough, just kind of on a side note, one of the said actors in that same show, too, was the actor who plays Nate on Legends of Tomorrow. Just tiny thing, but I just think it's kind of interesting. It's like, oh, she's back on Fox with that whole situation. So I just thought that was just kind of interesting in the long run, which is like, it's like, oh, like whoever, because Gil is like, well, the FBI is taking over this case. They have that authority. Plus, they don't like you. Obviously, like Malcolm was never big on making friends, which is interesting because now he's kind of got a group of friends. He's got Danny, they're friends. He's got JT, friendly enough, but they're working on it. And Odrissa, who definitely kind of likes Malcolm. But Megan Good's character, part of me goes like, okay, so you and Malcolm work together, or are we talking about an ex situation, which you could be colleagues and exes, and that probably muddies that whole situation? Because I think she's the one in particular that's like, oh, we don't want Malcolm anywhere near this case. So obviously, like the way he handled things before, as hence why he got fired in the first place. So it might be stuff like that. But it's like, well, what about all the good that he's done with the police? And he'll probably bring up some of the stuff that he's done in the past and to probably try to complicate navigate his current relationship with the cops. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what that's all about. You know, who Megan Good's character is and what that means going forward with this case, especially since Malcolm, as well as the entire team, is taken off of it, which Malcolm is most likely to try and handle this on his own, secretly investigating, which that's just going to get him, most likely the entire team, into more and more trouble, but we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.